Welcome to EBNet Stream. This is Leon Kralin, and today, for the first time ever, I'm going to be interviewing an astrophysicist and space scientist. Isn't that interesting? Given Phaladi, welcome, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much, Leon, and the viewers as well. Thank you. It's good to be here.
Given, why on earth am I speaking to an astrophysicist when this is a financial services channel? Explain to me how you went from studying to be that. You should be the next, or you should be Elon Musk at this point. Why are you in financial services?
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting journey that I had to embark on. So when I joined, obviously, the university, I wanted to be a nuclear physicist. So I studied undergraduate and degree in physics. And then, because you don't have obviously BSc in nuclear physics per se. So while I was trying to pursue that, then I was approached and also offered a scholarship by the National Astrophysics and Space Science Program, because at the time there were a lot of these science facility like your South African largest telescope, SALT, Hardrau, and so many other observatories around the country, which they needed scientists to be able to do that. So which I embarked on that. I did honors and I also did masters. But this is what then happened after the coursework, which was the master's coursework, which was, I think we're doing about 18 modules in 6 months. So then I had a breather and I had time to myself. And that, unfortunately, that's exactly where all things started. Because when I had time to myself, I started introspecting and say, do I want to continue and do the PhD into academic world? Or do I then try to do something else? And when I was trying to do all the research, then I came across this word quant, and which was now the most popular word in particular in Wall Street and even in the country, where a lot of engineers, scientists, they were all getting into banking and finance. And I started building a lot of interest, attending a lot of what you call lecture, not necessarily like invitation, we know where you got open lectures, and in that period, I met two people in particular. One was Jeremy Gardner from the Investec. So he came and he was talking about the future of China, show all those Chinese mascot, and I'm interested in that. The second person was the gentleman by the name of Dr. Emmanuel Deman, who wrote a book called My Life as a Quant. And he also came in, he's a ex-UCT graduate, and he was doing incredible stuff at Wall Street. So I managed to have time chat to them, and they said, no, if there's something that you really like, we also came from the same space. And yeah, then that's exactly what happened. I started obviously applying, getting rejected then there, but eventually Sanlam gave me an opportunity, and that's how I found myself in this world.
So you were actually at the, I almost want to say, the culmination of where quantitative analysis, in to a degree, the investment management world, but actually more in the investment consulting world, started becoming more of the norm than the exception. And you moved from Sanlam to Rescura in the early days of Rescura still, I think. So what was that like? And the reason I'm asking you that is when I have a look at your career progression, you've gone from working within a business to then having this entrepreneurial need to do something yourself, then finding that perhaps a bit difficult, which I'd like to ask you about, back into business, but you've kept on trying, and we'll get to eventually where you are now and how far are you on that. But talk to me first of all about going into Rescura and helping develop that kind of thinking.
Yeah. I mean, both Sanlam and Rescura were very critical in terms of the initial exposure. So my initial exposure was within the asset liability modeling, and the crafting of the investment strategy for retirement funds in particular. So I at Sanlam, I used to look after what normally called SALI, which is Sanlam Liability Index, at the time when they launched that. And I worked with incredible actuaries, which they've held my hand, early days where I didn't know some of these terms. Logically I knew with what I was doing, but some of the terms I didn't know, And then I moved to Rescura. And then I think at Rescura, it was a very interesting period because there I worked with the team in the special project, right? And the guys that I was working with were ex-well PhD holders in physics, Andrew Felbillion, which had a theoretical physics, and Petro Greff, who had solid state physics. So it was an easy, I think, team to work with, and we did incredible stuff, and obviously exposed to some of the big clients, having worked with the likes of Jared as well, who was very incredible. I think that has helped me to, I think, in a way, shape me and help me to grasp a lot of things in the industry, be able to deal with clients, be able to come up with solution. And subsequently, then I switched into fund management space. Obviously that's my journey at 27-4, where I also was a portfolio manager and a CIO, right? So in that regard, I think, and that's where my interest of alternative space as well started in.
So
And from that, yes,
sorry, just to interrupt there, before we get to, I'll call it your interest and then passion for alternatives and Africa, because Africa I also see is synonymous with you in terms of a passion that you have. You have this entrepreneurial mindset or spirit within you.
yeah,
Tell me a little bit where that comes from without taking me through the history of what you've
yeah,
tried,
yeah,
succeeded,
yeah,
and failed. All entrepreneurs
yeah.
fail at some point. But just take me through, where does that spirit come from? Where does that drive come from to want to develop something that's your own?
I mean, if I were to take it back, it actually came from my late father, who was a manager of a brewery at a time. Funny enough, the brewery that was funded by the Puti's father, was Dr. Mahalima Hanyele, the National Soccer Brewery. And at that time, he had this thing of always trying to expose me to some of these guys that have done very well. So that entrepreneurial spirit started there. The other second part that helped with the entrepreneurial spirit was when I was at UCT, coming from the village, in the rural areas. One of the stuff that I used to struggle with was things like internet. When you go back, there's no internet one more. So my first business, funny enough, is a business called Galactic Internet Connection, which I set up in the rural areas. And that's it. From that moment, I knew how to deal with the CIPC, the CPROs at the time, and everything, and just added based on that experience, and which I have, like you have said, engaged in other businesses. Some were successful, and some were not as successful. But that's a culmination of where all the entrepreneurial spirit started from.
Okay, so in that regard, if I'm stereotypical in my view, I'd say, right, here's a smart guy, mathematical in his nature, whichever side of the brain that is, I always get confused. Starts a business, has a spirit, learns the business side of things. But that one thing when starting a business that's perhaps not aligned with that stereotype is the ability to engage customers, to build relationships. Because I suppose a little bit more introvert in nature, or at least I'll see you that way, having known you for what's nearly 15 years or so. So you now have a business that you started. How long ago is that now that you started Regive?
Yeah, so we started in 2018, got our license in the middle of COVID lockdown 2020. So we've effectively been running for just 5 years.
So that business has now become a going concern. I'll call it a success. Part of that, and I've seen you at the conferences engaging people. So how easy or difficult was that for you as the stereotype? Maybe the stereotype's wrong, so I'm testing. How easy was it for you to develop that side of things?
Yeah, I mean it's I guess it's a combination as well. Going back to my science world, is even though majority of the scientists, all these physicists, astronomers, most of them we are introverts, you know. Somehow I don't know whether we're trained to be like that and whatnot, but there's another element that people are not aware of is we always have to present our results. You know, whether you do it in the lab, whether it's a paper and whatnot, you have to stand in front of people and tell them why you think what you have done is great, you know. And I think those were some of the lessons of being able to engage with people. But more than anything else, you also have to have a little bit of multiple personality, you know, and that's something that I have, you know, when I stand in front of clients or whoever that I need to convince. I've got that what they normally call a Sasha moment, you know. So you need to be able to get to that space and make sure that you simplify your message as simple as you can and be able to win them over, you know, because some of the stuff that we're dealing with, they're more complicated in nature, but you need to be able to simplify it because you're dealing with people that may have never even had such words in the past. So those are some of the things that I had to learn. And ultimately is to become more like a professional chef in a boutique restaurant. You know, you go and cook and you must as well be able to take the very same stuff that you have cooked and go and serve the customer.
But you know, it's so many times when I've mentored younger guys, they always tell me how this is their personality and therefore this is what they can be. And I always keep on saying, no, you can learn. You will learn if as long as you're open to it. And you're a classic case in that regard. You have to adapt, you have to learn. And sometimes what you think you might not be good at sometimes becomes your greatest skill at the end of the day. But just tell me more about your business currently. I want to start with your success. So you started up a business. Tell us about it. Tell us what it focuses on, and speak to me about the challenge of going through COVID. And like any business, it takes time. You've got to plug away, and then ultimately you hope for success. So end off with where you are now in that journey.
Yeah. All right. No, I mean, obviously the journey is a continuation of something that I've started in the past. If you look, I used to run a business called Palai Alternative Investment. So that's as well passion on the alternative. What are the lessons that I learned there that I moved across to this one? The other one was pure consulting, right? Problem with the pure consulting is that the decision making, you know, you have no discretion. You always have to go and bounce back. Sometimes you've got multiple consultants that you have to deal with just to make that one decision. So I needed to make sure that when I move into this thing, I've got discretion. So that discretionary license was very important. So which when I started, the initial intention was to get into an existing infrastructure, buy it, acquire it, and obviously with all the licenses, and then start raising the capital. I wasn't successful after approaching a couple of guys. Then I decided to apply the license, which was late 2019. In the middle of the license application, then we had this lockdown. So I had to wait for almost 8 months before I got the license, which we got in the middle of the COVID lockdowns that is in June, 2020. But simply put, what we wanted to build with Regive, it was to continue with the alternative space, in a way taking the alternative space into the mainstream. So what are we focusing on? We're focusing on what we call the liquid alternatives. So we're building portfolios with the construct being the hedge funds in that space. So, and I think the advantage of obviously using the hedge fund as part of the construct is the tools, that the hedge fund gives you, the ability to short, the leverage, and the derivative usage that you can be able to use in that space. Then the second part that we also are offering there is the private market, right? So we actually have the private debt and private equity. We have separated the two mainly because of their risk return profile and also the involvement, because the extent of involvement in those asset class. And then the last part is the protected equity or the structured products, And I think when we started off, we started with model portfolios, right? We went and presented, this is our best view, this is how if we were to put this portfolio, that's how they'll behave. And we started obviously engaging with people around them for quite some time, I think for more than 6 months. And then effectively we got the first mandate in that space. We've been very successful in that. We're reaching in. I'm talking about liquid alternatives. We've got two portfolios there. We've got what we call SMART, which is the absolute return portfolio. Then we've got the equity focused portfolio, and all of them they've got live money and their segregated mandate. So we've been very successful in terms of the performance. And then on the private market as well, we launched the first one called Guguletu, and we had the first close there, and we have actually deployed 75% of the capital. We're still in the capital raising period. We have just recently launched the private debt now as well. We have just secured a client in that regard. We'll be rolling it out. And then the structured product, we have just finished a 3-year as well in terms of the performance on that one. So we have been one way or the other being successful in how we have as well wanted to build this business.
So there's in the areas that you focus from an institutional money's perspective. I mean, there's obviously challenges and perceptions that exist within the market. High fees, illiquidity, high risk in the case of hedge funds, albeit that's a bit of a misnomer. So through that process, you've had to overcome those barriers. And as a business starting off, you've had to bide your time to get the mandates, build the track record and so on, which is not easy to ultimately do. Through that process, before I come back to private markets, have you ever wanted to give up or thought about giving up?
Yes, there are a couple of times where, particularly in the early days, when we go out, you have an engagement, you present your story, and then you just realize the first thing that you start picking up is perhaps the very same asset consultant that you're talking about does not know what you're talking about, but they are not humble enough to say that they don't know. So those are some of the barriers that we have to deal with. The second thing is you go with the private, let's say, sorry, the pension fund themselves, the trustees. They may like you, but they may not understand what you're talking about. So those are some of the challenges that we had to deal with. The other part is the track record. Because you go all out, they say, no, we know you have been. Some people, they know you, they can quote where you have been and whatnot, but they say as Regive Capital, you have no track record, and we were very fortunate that the initial clients, they took that leap of faith on us. And I think to date, when we look back, it was the best thing for themselves and also the best thing for us, So those were some of the challenges that we had to deal with. Of course, the issue of fees always comes up, and I think you have brought it up. For us, we always look at fees as a cost of investing, and if you have looked at how the asset management or the financial services industry has now highly regulated, you have to look at all those systems. They cost you people as well. They don't come very cheap, and a whole lot of other things that you need to put in place to be able to run a successful fund management company.
It's got to be one of the more difficult companies to start, if I could put it that way, because there are a lot of dynamics and a lot of barriers and a lot of inertia in decision making because of the nature of institutional capital. So it is difficult from that perspective because the costs are high, and you've got to show the depth before you can get the money, but you can't afford the depth before you get the money. So it's a bit of a catch-22. So anyway, those who succeed, hats off. That's the reality. When you speak about that niche that you're in, you've always spoken about Africa and not just South Africa, which is different. So either you have a passion or you just chose to focus broader than what other people are talking about. So where does that come from and what's that all about?
Couple of things. So when we were starting the NASP program, the National Astrophysics and Space Science program, one of the challenges that the lecturers or the organizers, the steering committee had, was when they were trying to look for the top students in the country. There were fewer guys who were interested in science, and more so it was even worse if you from previously disadvantaged background. So what then they had end up doing is they went and got a lot of guys from the different universities in the continent, right? And my passion for Africa started with at that time where I interacted with a lot of guys from Uganda, Namibia, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and whatnot, right? And which have today, all of them, they're still my friends. They are professors and whatnot. They do incredible things in the world. So that's the first starting point of Africa. The second thing as well, the interest of Africa is when we look at the challenges that this long-term capital can be able to solve. We've got similar challenges. Part of that is unemployment. And that is why the issue of migration, it's about when the country doesn't create employment opportunity, guys will move from there to the next one. So, and my view is we need to be able to solve Africa in its entirety through this long-term capital, and so that's where the passion came from. And I think during my previous as well, what you call involvement with companies and also my companies, I did a lot of training for retirement funds from different part of the world, whether it be West Africa, East Africa, and whatnot. And I think the more you engage with them, the more you realize that actually we've got similar challenges, and that is why the passion for Africa. I mean, I've done a lot of work in Zambia. I've done a lot of work in Zimbabwe and in it's not in Zimbabwe, in Botswana and Namibia. Actually, spend a lot of time in Namibia, particularly on the private market side.
Well, it's good to hear someone thinking more broader than just our own boundaries, if I could put it that way. Because there's not enough of that. We tend to try to say, well, let's button down and just do what's good for us. But the reality is that might not always be the best thing. So
Yeah,
it's pleasing to hear that. Given I'd like you just to please share with our audience, given your experience, and I still see you as a young man. Either you've aged well or you are a young man, one of the two. But just share with them a little bit about what you've learned through this journey, what stood you in good stead, and also maybe not so much where you've made a mistake. I'm not so interested. We all make mistakes, but what's the lesson that you've also learned about that's not the thing that you should be
yeah.
doing?
Yeah. I think the most important part is you need to work hard, Um, I mean, I don't, I can't subscribe to 9 to 5. It has never been for maybe perhaps I've learned from the guys that had good work ethics. I've been mentored by the very same people that they will wake you up at 2 o'clock and they want you to run some models and whatnot. And I've done that, and I always expect that even from the people that I deal with. So working hard is very important. Again, you need to continue to network and embrace, I think, all the little support that you get from people. Some people they may not give you anything, but for the fact that they give you their time, it's worth it. Some of the lessons is just don't be too hard on yourself. I started off as young. I mean, I matriculated at 15. I've started life at 15. I've been a visitor at my father's house since 15. So I've made plenty mistake. I've started a lot earlier than most people, but eventually I've learned a lot. I can't say I regret some of the stuff, but I could have done them better. I could have done them maybe better, but I've learned, in doing them the same way that I've done them.
Well, given all I can say is that I take my hat off to you, and everybody should, to you and people like you that have persisted, that have followed their dream, that have failed and succeeded, and who have learned over time. You're an example ultimately for others, and I'm sure you don't sit back enough and think about the importance that people like yourself ultimately play in also the next generation and the aspirations that they might have. So just like you set off starting to want to be an astrophysicist or nuclear scientist, I don't know if it was because you wanted to bring energy or blow up the world, whichever one it was. Now you have a passion for building Africa, solving problems, and ultimately making a success of your business. My message to you is congratulations. I look up to you in that respect. And I wish you all the very success from myself personally, but also from all of the viewers. at EBNet Stream and the team at EBNet Stream.
Thank you very much, and I'm very humbled by your words as well, Leon. Thank you very much.
So thank you for joining us today. That was Given Phaladi, the founder and CEO of Regive Capital, and this is Leon Kralen of EBNet Stream.